Hello and welcome to another episode of Whiteboard Sessions. My name is Andrew Maff and I am the founder and CEO of BlueTuskr, a full-service digital marketing agency for e-commerce sellers. And today I'm going to go through my top 20 different channels and platforms for you to run your digital advertising campaigns on, specifically for e-commerce sellers. Now, when I refer to digital advertising, for those of you who may not know, I'm referring to you spending your money currently and immediately seeing results right away. I'm not talking about long-term things like SEO or anything like that. We're going to go strictly through different advertising channels. And we're going to go through 4 different ones. Now, I had to write these down because I knew I wasn't going to remember all 20. Plus, I started getting into so much more than 20, so I kind of had to just bear with me here. But so we're going to go through 4 different areas here. So we're going to do social, which is obvious. We're going to do search, which is kind of obvious. We're going to do what I refer to as traditional digital. And then we're also going to do some other stuff that I think a lot of people miss out on. So social, this one's really obvious, right? So we're going to go through, technically this is 3. However, it's all on one platform. So I guess that kind of doesn't count, but I'm counting it as 3, so deal with it. But so obviously we're talking about the big guys of Facebook and Instagram, which also includes WhatsApp. It also includes Facebook Messenger, but to me that's still Facebook, so I'm not going to count that one. But these 3, we all know big guys, right? These are the main ones. These are the ones everyone goes to. And the reason we wanted to do this whole video was mainly because of these, because I see a lot of sellers who say we're doing advertising on Facebook and Instagram, and we are doing Google ads, and now that's it. We've basically hit the end of our realm here of what we can do, which is not true. So what we're going to do here is basically we got Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, right? So these are your first main big 3. So we got those out of the way. So then you have your next one, which is Pinterest. So Pinterest, I believe, and you're not here for my handwriting, you shouldn't be. But Pinterest, I believe, is severely underrated. It has so much search volume, and the best part about the way that people use Pinterest is that they're looking for a solution, they're looking for a product, or they're looking for an idea, but they rarely, if ever, search for a specific brand name. So it's a great opportunity to find someone who's not really sure who they want to shop with just yet. Then, of course, we have Twitter, which, to each his own on how well that does. And it's got a very specific audience, but Twitter's definitely another big one. It still does very well. It's great. Basically, everything I list here at bare minimum you should be retargeting on, but you definitely should be testing different audiences and prospecting here. Then we have Snapchat, right? So Snapchat, pretty obvious, slightly younger market from what you're used to. And then obviously the way that you're kind of sending creative to Snapchat is obviously a little bit different than you would with Facebook or Instagram, but Snapchat is another great one that can do really well in terms of prospecting. And of course, I can't mention Snapchat without mentioning TikTok, which I guess I'll just do TT, right? I'm trying to limit my handwriting. So TikTok's, I don't need to tell you TikTok is exploding. And it's getting to the point now where, although it is a majority of a younger audience, the audience is so large now that you are starting to see slightly older people. I'm on TikTok. I know I have people in their 40s and 50s I'm aware of that have TikTok. Like it's definitely a growing platform. So TikTok right now, in my opinion, is where Instagram was, years ago. It's where Facebook obviously started. So it's definitely starting to take off. This is another great area to start testing out doing ads. In e-commerce, they have some issues with tracking conversion value that I've had problems with, but they do track conversion. So if you focus on CPA, it's not that big of a deal. However, they are working on it. So I'm sure by the time maybe even this video comes out, it might be solved. So another one we have is LinkedIn, which I know what you're thinking. It's e-commerce. Why LinkedIn? However, there's a lot of sellers out there that can benefit from this. Even if you're just retargeting, but also if you're doing prospecting for office supplies or customized apparel where you can add your logo to it, or really anything along that line where you can even kind of spin it to be tied towards something specific to that platform, which would obviously be a little bit more business related. But LinkedIn is not something that I usually tell people to forget, because sometimes LinkedIn can do very well specifically for e-commerce. When you talk about Reddit, I do like Reddit. That's a D. I do like Reddit. It has a specific audience. You got to be really careful with how you run ads on there, because people on Reddit are diehard fans of certain things, and they're also really mean about other things. So you got to be a little careful with how you run ads on Reddit. But it can definitely be a great area to do specific ads, specifically like if you're prospecting. Another one here, which I'm going to do this because I'm going to run out of room, is Quora. So if you're not familiar with Quora, Quora is a social media platform where essentially you can ask questions and you can answer questions. And it's basically an area for a lot of people to just learn about a lot of stuff. There's different groups and things like that you can join, but it's a great area for you to basically be able to learn certain things and ask certain things and kind of build a community there. It's very specific to a B2B side, but I have seen B2C leverage it very well when you get specific into an industry. So if you're a company that sells surf wax and you're on there constantly asking questions or answering questions about surfing, it's going to start to build your name. It's going to be a personal name and not a brand name, but it's going to do well regardless. And you can run ads on here. That's great. So if people are asking about how much wax do I need to use for your surfboard, then all of a sudden you're running ads in front of them. So I'm going to say influencers. And so this is where I get a little bit, that's influencers. So this is where I'm going to get a little bit specific about what I was referring to in this whole video. So basically I'm talking about what can you spend your money on right now that will show you results right away. If you think about SEO, so you're cleaning up your technical SEO, you're doing off-page, you're backlinking and things like that, that takes some time. Or if you're doing email marketing, it's a little bit straightforward, but you're not really, if you already have the software platform, you're not spending anything to send out an email. So I'm talking about what can you spend money on that will show you immediate results. And so influencers are obviously a great way to do this. Influencers, there's a ton of different ways to do it. You can go through different platforms. I'm going to try not to list any third-party vendors here, just so I'm not catering to anyone. But you can obviously go through those. You can build your own, which is an easier way to do it if you want to save some money, which is you just go out and start outreaching to influencers yourself and start negotiating with them. But another way that we like doing influencers is if you're releasing a new product or a new product line, or you have a theme, or you have some sale coming out or something like that, is you collect a big old list of influencers and then you basically just do an email blast to them saying, hey, we're willing to pay X for you to post about our new product coming out in October. Your post needs to be out in November. Then all of a sudden, all of these influencers are posting about you in 1 month, and it can really snowball effect. But anyway, I digress. So that's definitely another way. And I kind of coupled this with social because most of the time that's the route they're going to end up going, although that's not always the case. So now we have one that kind of borders the two, right? Which will be YouTube. And I'm obviously going to couple this one in with Google Ads, right? So Google Ads is obviously your largest one, like one of the larger search platforms that you have. YouTube, I had this statistic and now I can't remember. It's like the second or third largest searched site next to Google Ads, and I believe next to Facebook. If not, YouTube's actually bigger than Facebook. I'm not 100% on that one yet. However, YouTube's massive, run through the Google Ads platform. So although these are the same platform, I still counted them as two because they're two different channels. Google Ads, very self-explanatory. You have your shopping ads, your search ads, your display ads, and then obviously your YouTube ads. There's so much you can do through Google, but it's the largest search engine out there, so it'd be dumb for you not to do it. But like I had mentioned, basically everyone does these two and then gives up when it's all of these other ones we're going to talk about today that you need to remember. So the other one is actually it would be the search engine's Bing. They're called Microsoft ads now. But that also, for those of you who don't know, and if you haven't started to see this creep up in your Google Analytics, this is also DuckDuckGo. So DuckDuckGo is another search engine where basically it looks very similar to Bing and Google, and they act kind of the same with the exclusion that it doesn't track anything that you're doing. So it doesn't start to cater what you're seeing based on what you've searched before, which is what Bing and Google do. Basically what you do is when you search something, the results that show up are the exact same results that someone else is going to get, which, like I said, is not the same for Google and Bing. So they're kind of preaching to the privacy side, and they have started to grow extremely fast, especially over the past year or two. And all of your ads on DuckDuckGo currently are done through Microsoft Ads, which is also for Bing. By the time this video comes out, who knows? Maybe that'll change. Maybe they'll have their own advertising platform. But for now, it's Bing. So those are pretty much the two major search ones. They do kind of cover a couple different places. But this is where I like to kind of play around. It gets a little interesting. So I refer to this as traditional digital. And the only reason I call it that is because it kind of sounds cool. And it's kind of like the traditional advertising done through digital. So if you think of radio advertising, you're typically referring to that as like a D2C, right? Where you're kind of doing direct to consumer through some kind of a DRTV kind of thing, or however you want, direct response kind of stuff. But the nice thing about doing it digitally is obviously you can track a little bit more. So one of the best ways to do that, at least for us personally, what I like to do is Spotify. So Spotify has its own, whatever, man, that's Spotify. Spotify has its own self-serve platform, so you can actually just upload your own, radio spot, or if you want to call it a radio spot, you upload your own audio, and you're able to run the ads that way, and you can track, how many people have listened to it. Then depending on if you're providing a coupon code or anything like that, obviously people get it for free. There's a paid version of Spotify, similar to like you would have like a Netflix or something like that. And if they have that, they don't hear ads. But if they're paying for if they're taking the free version, they're going to get your ads. So Spotify is a really interesting way, and I've seen it work really well. And it's great for brand awareness, but it's obviously awesome as well for prospecting, especially around heightened times. So to give you guys an example about something we've done before with a couple clients, we'll do a YouTube ad and then maybe some display ads to a warm audience for like a campaign. So let's say we're doing like a big Black Friday deal or something like that. We'll do a warm audience to your YouTube. We'll do a warm audience and display ads for Google Ads, and then we'll just hit like almost all of these for the most part, and we'll do a big splash for that entire month on Spotify. So basically just everywhere we can possibly be to our warm audience, because I don't know where all of our customers are at all times, so I'd like to make sure that I can cover my bases. So Spotify is a great one that I think is really underrated right now, and it's probably going to get slammed after a while. And then the other one that is really interesting, I like this one for if you have obviously an e-commerce website, but also if you have a brick and mortar, and that would be billboards. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's not digital, but it is. So there's actually several companies out there. Again, I'm not going to list anyone specific, so I'm not favoring anyone. But there are companies out there where you can upload your information, your creative, to their website and pay for, let's say, 5 views a day on one billboard off I-95, in which case that billboard is a giant digital billboard and it rotates every 5 seconds or something like that. And basically you can actually run ads on a billboard, and you can basically do it just like it's a giant TV screen outside. So it's really cool. It can work really well. I'm a big fan of it for people that have a brick and mortar. So we'll run that same ad in brick and mortar so that their website can also benefit from it. But doing e-commerce on a billboard in a state or a city that you're not in can sometimes be rough, depending on what you're selling. So if you're doing, I used surfing before as an example, Miami, California, those kind of places where you have a heavy surfing population, billboards wouldn't be a bad idea regardless, because people may still want to shop online. And then we have the other stuff. So this is kind of like, these are the basics where like sometimes we'll speak to someone and they'll know, okay, these are good. And then every now and then, we'll throw this one out there and they're like, okay, I didn't think about that. And then this one is kind of where you got to get a little creative, right? So some of these other ones, so what I'm referring to is basically website real estate, right? So web real estate. Feel free to comment and tell me how horrible my handwriting is. So leave it to a guy with a shitty handwriting to do a whiteboard session. So web real estate, right? So website real estate, what I'm referring to is basically finding a website out there that is mainly on a media side, or maybe it's a blogger or something like that. And yeah, you can do the influencer route if they're a blogger, or you can ask them to post or whatever and they can build an article. But the other thing that a lot of people don't think about is what's on someone else's website that you can also leverage. So think about like banners or pop-ups, right? So if they have a banner up at the top of their homepage, or ideally in the header that goes throughout the whole site, or maybe on the homepage they have like a little display side. So obviously they might have AdSense set up where display ads may run on their site, but you might be able to strike a deal with them where you can own that spot for a month and go and surpass Google, right? Because in Google's situation here, they're kind of like the wholesaler. But if you're the manufacturer of the creative and you can go straight to the person you want to run the ad on, skip over Google and see if you can get a discount because you're guaranteeing someone a certain amount of money. So banners and then pop-ups, right? Like if a pop-up shows up on someone's site and it's currently offering 10% off to your website, that's fantastic. So it's a great way for you to leverage that if you're able to find and strike deals with someone who's in media or bloggers or really any other company that's just willing to go this route with you. You can partner with people who have like-minded stuff. I don't know why I'm talking about surfing so much. I'm not a surfer, but like I said before, if you sell surf wax, talk to a surf company and be like, hey, we're willing to give all of your customers 15% off in exchange for X amount of money. Or maybe you give them a percentage and it's an affiliate fee or something like that. But this is essentially like a sponsorship, right? So we're kind of talking about like sponsoring a certain area. And then, what else do I have here? So the other thing is newsletters, right? So yeah, you could do the same concept here, right? So you could find a company who has their own newsletter and sponsor the newsletter as well. Or you can look out to some of those companies where their whole company is a newsletter. So you think about like, you have those big ones out there like the Skim and the Click and Morning Brew and Daily Carnage and like all these other newsletters, which I'm sure I'll end up doing a video on one day too. But all of those, you can sponsor an area on those newsletters. And some of those newsletters have millions of subscribers, in which case you're spending a lot less money for something that's direct. And we all know how well newsletters do for ourselves. So imagine hopping on someone else's newsletter. I'm not talking about buying email addresses. I'm talking about sponsoring a spot on someone else's newsletter. The other side of that too, which kind of ties into here, is like I had mentioned with partnering with a surfboard company. If you're selling surf wax, then you can actually sponsor a certain area on that surfboard company's newsletter. All you have to do is reach out to these companies and start this conversation. So if you have someone internally that's maybe your, basically your sole paid media buyer, this is the area where they're doing all their negotiations, because this stuff, obviously once you optimize it, can run itself for a little while. And then outside of this, the last one I have, which we all know, which by the way, if you haven't heard ours yet, tune in. But podcasts, right? So reaching out to podcasts, again, not sure why I keep going the surfing route, but there are a ton of podcasts out there about surfing and, different times that it's great to go surfing in certain areas and certain like states to go surfing in or certain countries. So being able to sponsor somewhere where your community is constantly listening, yes, you can go the Spotify route where you're basically paying for commercials time, but in this spot, you're paying for specific airtime to a specific show that they're watching. So it's almost like, think of it as like product placement during a show as if you were watching TV, right? So these are all 20 of my top 20 for digital advertising, where you can take your money right now, put it into one of these channels or platforms or strategies, and immediately start seeing a return upon its launch. I'm sure there's a ton more, and I'm going to bet that someone comments and tells me about all the other stuff that I missed out on. However, feel free. Let's do another video. Let's do another one where I say, like, here's 10 more or something like that. But if you think of anything else that's not on this list, feel free to comment and let me know which channels you think we're missing out on or which platforms that are specifically to digital advertising. And then, obviously, if there's a video that you want us to do another time, feel free to comment. But otherwise, appreciate you watching. Rate, review, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will see you next time.